forgot that it's Friday the 13th. Incredible night. Got a good breeze. So I want to just take a quick run through, see what I can convey as far as this idea of one-to-one representation. So let me just try to describe how it works. So what is it? What is the function of it? It represents a group of people perfectly. So it just represents a group of people. It doesn't cure cancer. If these people are bad people, you have a group that represents them. So that group should be bad, right? We're not purifying people. We're not improving their thoughts or anything. We're just representing them. So if you want to do representation, this is what you want. If you want to control people and manipulate them into doing things they don't want, this is not for you. So this is a system that is based on absolute liberty. Everything is voluntary. There's not one thing that you do in this process that is required. There's nothing mandatory, nothing done by force. And that's when you should wonder if someone says they have the answer to the universe. Okay, let me hear it. And, if everyone would just follow my directions and do everything I said, or be a good person, or choose the right choice, that's not a solution. Solutions need to be able to be used where anybody does whatever they want. So, what is the solution? The solution is something. It's a phrase that we use to refer to something that is not what it is. So it's a false phrase that we've been convinced that this is something that we already have, that this is something that's good, and it's not. The answer to the universe is elected representation, actual representation. So elected is the key word that makes it powerful, that you've elected to do something. You've elected voluntarily a person to speak on your behalf. So that's why it's reality-based. We're not asking anyone to do anything they don't want to do. We're not denying any reality here. We're just saying flat out, if this person says that he elects this other person to speak on their behalf, that's what he's doing. And the problem is, when I'm talking about that, everyone has been so brainwashed with this idea that the government is elected representation. So people think of the word elected, as something official. But elected is just chosen. So you elect somebody and they are elected. That's not even up for debate. You chose that person. They are chosen. They were chosen. They were elected. But we don't use the word that way. We ask, was he elected? We say, no, he wasn't elected. So we're using this word when we talk about governments. We're using the word elected and representation in ways that are not remotely connected to those words anymore. So that is not what I'm talking about. Nothing to do with governments or anything like that. Governments talk to us. This is a way that we could talk to governments, right? And that's why I think the most important body of elected representatives, which I'm calling a board, BOER. The board is the exact replica one-to-one representative group, because it is the body of elected representatives, right? So we're using the word to mean chosen. And so what that is, let's look at the reality of the situation. We already have a board, right? We already have a board of adult American citizens, 250 million of us, of the US, right? We exist. We're already a body of elected representatives. We each speak on our own behalf. Okay? So that's what's going on now. That's where we are now. We're each speaking on our own behalf. So we are not having a conversation about anything. We're having a bunch of separate conversations, but we need to have a single conversation. And the way to do that is to use math. That if we can add up how many of us support something, we can always compare it to the common denominator of the whole total of the group. This concept of the common denominator allows us to see what groups of people If two separate groups agree on something, even if they never talk to each other, they're part of the same conversation. I know it's not how we would think of a conversation, the back and forth, but they're saying, we support this statement. These guys are saying, we agree. People can respond to other groups. They can talk to individuals, of course. But that freedom, the conversation needs to happen. And what we're doing is we're having these illusions of conversation. These are not real conversations, right? These are people that are kind of distracting from what's going on because it's not measured. It's not anything real. There's no substance to it. And it doesn't matter if someone lies or anything. No one's held accountable. But we need to have a board of adult citizens of the United States. And all that is required of that is elected representation. So electing a representative. So each person elects a person, themselves or someone else, to be a representative, to speak on their behalf in this conversation. So if I elect a person, they speak on my behalf in that conversation. So meanwhile, I'm speaking on my own behalf anyway, right? Because I'm go back home, I talk to my family and talk to different things and people and everything. So you're not silencing yourself, removing your vocal cords or something. You're choosing a representative to problem solve for some specific purpose. That first prime purpose for United States citizens is going to be the U.S. government, the federal government. The federal government, we need a board of adult U.S. citizens to oversee the federal government. It's out of control. I mean, it's just out of control. And we need to have our voice spoken about what's going on there. We're not having that voice now. You don't have a voice now, is my point. You don't have a voice anywhere. You're not really talking. So that's an illusion if you think you're accomplishing something. Let's say you have a rally of 1 million people. Like, what does that mean? What does that even mean? What have you done? What has that accomplished? So imagine we each elect a representative. Think about the math of what's going on. We each start with one, 250 million of us. I'm a one, you're a one. Then we have an opportunity periodically, every period. So when you start these processes out, I suggest more rapid that expands over time to the full period it will end up being, so that people have more time to cycle through different choices of candidates, find out what's going on, because everyone's going to be confused at first. We're all used to thinking electing a representative is something where you choose a pre-chosen set. If I were to ask you on the street, who would you choose as who would you elect as your representative? You would say, who I have to choose from. You don't have. We're not used to freedom. We're not used to the idea that we could elect a person in a way that is electing, voluntary. It's always this, cow pen where you go left or right. That's not really electing, but it is electing. It is absolutely choosing when your choices are two to go left or right. That is choosing. But I'm saying it's far less. It's just a very small amount of electing compared to how much not electing it is. It's just mountains of not electing with our governments. So this is again not about governments. This is about not changing the government. That's a lot of effort. This is forming something ourselves. We need to come together and have a conversation to start problem solving. The adults in the room, the responsible party, not a political party, the responsible party. People that are understanding that we need to take responsibility, figure out what's going on, and problem solve. And through this process, if we have a more anarchist feel, we can start designing systems and things and take care of our own problems ourselves. Then we can start dismantling government. But you can't just attack government and say we want to stop it entirely. That's not going to work. That's just going to be another microfaction that's going to be in charge. So the way to do it methodically is to actually solve our problems ourselves and create that which makes government obsolete by solving problems ourselves. We don't need these problems solved. And then, but right off the bat, there are plenty of things we could get rid of and not do. all of the bulk. But once you get down, remove the fat. That's one thing. But the whole entire apparatus is unnecessary. So, but if you were to say, I want to dismantle it, even politely dismantle tomorrow, that doesn't make any sense. It's not a strategic thing to do. What do those people that work in those fields do? What are the people that dedicated their whole life to building it around this system and this setup? You just want to be fair to everybody involved and sort of grandfather things out and slowly sort of transfer in. But again, there's plenty of bulk that can be changed, plenty of things that can be immediately removed without question. It's just not everything. And so we could start making those decisions about how to do that, what to do, and all that. The best part is you don't have to do anything. If this is not your cup of tea, you don't really care, you're not interested in doing anything. You just simply say, okay. So this process is you allowing people to do that. So then you would choose a representative that would be for letting people do stuff and just making good choices. Maybe you'd say, I don't want to spend too much money. So yeah. So people would basically be pitching ideas to your representative. And the representative would say yes or no to certain ideas. You'd see that. You say, yeah, I like the way this is going. If that person offers feedback to where you can give them feedback, then they benefit from knowing what people want, what people like, and what they don't want. Because you're representing them. They chose you. And the beauty of this situation is there's no corruption like you're used to. The idea that you can corrupt somebody. You're thinking of officials with power. This is not an official with a power. This is a person representing people. They were chosen by that person. So you're saying, oh, well, what if they're so stupid they chose an evil person? Right. Then that's what they've chosen. So that's like again, it doesn't cure cancer. It doesn't make people choose good people. But that's what needs to happen. They need to go through that experience that, and so be it. But again, you're thinking officials. You're thinking some sort of power or imperium. There is no power involved here other than the ability to speak on behalf of somebody. It's just a number, RQ. That's all they have is a number. They're saying things and they have a number. So when this guy says he likes the color red and he has a RQ of 1%, which would be astoundingly huge for the United States, right? But and this whole group over here says they like the color red and they have a total RQ of 5% of that whole group. And they all unanimously agree. Then this other group has 10% of the RQ of the whole group, but half of them agree. So that's 5%, 5, 5, and 1. We now have 11 people, 11% of people in the United States that like the color red, right? So that's all. Just like the color red. That doesn't mean anything. But it is powerful in that, many people would like to know that, I guess. I mean, if that's something that these people have their representatives talking about, then they'd be like, okay, I guess the color red's important to people or what? But the point is, on issues of substance, we have actual raw data. Not raw data, but like actual you know, exact data, precise. We know exactly how many people would support something. Now, again, after a few cycles, so maybe 3 cycles to learn the process, 7 more cycles to really get the idea and organize and say, oh, wait a minute, I really need to take a different approach. Because that 7-year itch thing, there's some kind of a process. Maybe we rethink things after a certain amount of time. Either way, the human psychology has waves, I'm sure, and there'll be amounts of time that people spend on whatever. But that's what we can do, and all it takes is enough people. 1.67% of people of the United States citizens, adults, to say that they elect a person. Now, you could say you would elect a person, you would like to. You're expressing that you're interested in forming a board. And you're specifically going through the motions is the best way to do this you because you can elect people. Like I elected Thomas Massey for the federal government to oversee the federal government, right? So there's no power there. He's just going to be on behalf of Beau, he's going to be checking out things at the federal government and himself, right? So as far as we know. But from my perspective, all I know is I've elected Thomas Massey. You say you have elected another person. Okay, that's two people. And if enough people say they've elected someone, even if they say, I've elected myself under the concept of one to one representation or something, but that's it. You don't have to understand anything. Once enough people are asking or pointing out that they want to be able to choose a representative, someone's going to be starting to ask that, right? You know what I mean? Like if someone says, "Hey, I'd pay $10 for an ice cream cone right now," and enough people around that area say that enough days in a row, man, there'd be ice cream trucks showing up. I mean, someone's selling ice cream, right? So that's just how the world works. The whole way incentives work to move everything forward, which for whatever works best for everyone. The idea of Austrian economy, where everything is free market, but what it lacks is we don't have any structure to this. And I'm telling you, RQ is the simplest way to apply the most minimal bureaucracy to anything, any organization. So each person elects a representative. They just pick any member of the organization, even themselves. And then you measure their RQ. So the total people that you're representing, if you elected somebody, you got zero. Zero divided by whatever is zero. So you're out. You don't talk to anyone anymore in that conversation, in that body. You're not part of that body. When that body meets, you're not in the room. You're not reflecting on it or interfering with that in any way. But unless you want to, but you lock you out of the room. So I guess that's an example of someone being forced. They're not allowed to see that. They're not allowed to interfere with it. Of course, they're allowed to see it, but they're not allowed to interfere with the process. So that is some force in a way, but it's defense. So we're like, you know, not allowing you in, I guess, is forcing you out. But it's not so much forcing you out; it's not allowing you in. I mean, you would have a meeting place and you just wouldn't allow the person in. So that's why I don't see it as any force involved. Um, but so electing representatives. So each person, each person now has a number, an RQ, that numerator of the fraction. We could also call their RQ. That would often be referenced. It's how many people they represent. So within the group, you might use the RQ if it's a group of 8,000 people in a big church community or something. 8,000 people. What's his RQ? 75. Oh, she's 238. That's how you would refer to it. Understanding the entire time, you're dividing that by the common denominator. So they have that much speaking power. In other words, when we're all going to meet, they get that much of the speaking power. They get that much of whatever the budget of this thing is, if there's a budget. Whatever, it all just works out that's what everyone would do. That's the fair way to do it. He represents two people, so he gets two pieces of cake. Now you want to say certain things like, if we were to construct buildings for these people and they each get an office, each person gets a certain amount of things. Like if we we're giving cupcakes to all the representatives, each rep can get a cupcake, a single size equal cupcake, because they're each a human. So that's not, some ways you would not disperse everything in this proportional way, but their speaking power, when you're measuring what they support or don't support, is measured that way. And it's incredibly informal, but it can be absolutely formal. It can be something that is done in a very formal way. You could do things like the United States House of Representatives this way, but that's a completely different scenario. Okay, so this is a federal government, a group of state governments, which are themselves separate governments. That's another thing. But if we were to do it with the one-to-one, would be, you take the House of Reps, you have 435 seats, then you just have each person elect who they choose, and you add up how many people each person represents, the RQ. It's such a simple process. Now, you would take the top 435 spots, because if that's what we're doing, we got 435 seats. You could do it to where you have more seats, or these other people are in this extra part. There's just a million ways you could do it. And so when we start talking about things like that, this is why this is like a reform thing. We're talking about something that someone else is going to decide anyway. So you can imagine it for purposes of understanding what one to one is. You're getting as proportional as possible, you know. But one to one representation itself, pure one to one representation, actual one to one representation is exact replica. Not one human being is left out. Because if you're in a cave, an anarchist in a cave by himself, wants nothing to do with anyone, we still count that person if they're part of the group. If it's a U.S. citizen, we're dividing by 250 million always. We don't ever make up and pretend that those people, well, they abstain, so we don't count them. No. If you abstain, you did not vote yes. And that's a crucial concept. If you abstain, you did not vote yes. And we need to measure the yes votes of whatever we're talking about against the common denominator of the entire group. For instance, the RQ of Mamdani is 15.6%, mayor of New York. So I've told some people they think that's high and some think it's low, but that is only 15.6% of the people, the adult citizens of New York City, that chose to elect him. And imagine the power he has. So that's one of the problems with governments. They have all this power and it's not able to be dispersed equally. Well, what we need to do is share everything accordingly and proportionally if we're going to have to do that. Like if you're going to have a conversation together, each person gets the time to speak. You get the amount of time for the number of people you represent. In other words, if you choose to represent yourself, you don't elect anyone else, no one elects you, you're one. And if we're talking about the US CVAP, you're one out of 250 million people. So you don't get to talk at the meeting, right? There might be a link. You might get to put a link somewhere on the last page of a website, that kind of thing. But that's all that stuff is determined. How that's done is determined by the group. And the best part of this is if this boar, does something that people don't like, it's a self-cleaning bureaucracy. It's self-dismantling. It doesn't exist if there's no interest in it. It doesn't form to begin with. It doesn't form. It doesn't come to fruition. If I say I want Thomas Massey, and we don't get 1.67%, we don't even get up to nearly 2% of the population, which would be 4 million people. If we got 4 million people just to say, once a year, to say, yep, I elect this person, it doesn't mean anything. No one's listening to us. But if we said that, that would be enough. That would be enough for someone to say, well, wait a minute. Why don't we start measuring it? And what's going to happen, it's going to be co-opted, right? So typically like an Elon type character, a guy who really has his heart in the right place, and he gets in a pinch, he's going to go, you know what? I might just unleash the hounds of hell. Because once people can start speaking for themselves, things like the Epstein files are pretty much, that's going to be, no one likes that kind of thing. People don't really like that. And you get a lot of support. It's so crazy, right? It's so crazy. Would you support, the elite level? So they're so elite that even regular elites just are so offended by their eliteness. They're just so much further above. It's fascinating. That aspect as well. But anyway, so obvious things, like a border wall. We'll have a border wall because 87% of us want a border wall. As soon as we realize, wait a minute, we all want a border wall. Well, this is a non-issue. So once that's out, that a certain number of us want something, you can't run for office in the United States and oppose it, right? Because everyone would say, well, wait a minute, you're obviously, then you would know, well, I need to point this out to everyone. And everyone would go, oh, God, yeah, good call. Good catch, man. Thanks. No, that we should not let this guy in. Why would he say that? So you would not even go near that. Anything that was high level like that, high percentage of agreement. And there's not agreement on everything, but there is agreement on quite a bit. Like overt fraud over $1 billion. Not too many people on board with that. You know what I mean? But the point is, like, the vast majority of it. And what I mean is 50 years from now, if we were to start representing ourselves, 3 years to figure out how people elect people, 7 years to sort of figure out how we can kind of gather together and converse and work out some communication issues. We're going to start realizing, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that we agree on, and a lot of progress is going to be made in that next 40 years. So I predict 50 years, it will be unrecognizable. People will, from a utopia, people will think that this is utopia 50 years from now. But once it starts actively going, so I'm just one person. I've elected Thomas Massey. If you can elect somebody, then you can start this process. And once enough people do it, someone's going to create something very easy, a website, lots of websites, because it works for every group in the world. Large, small, better for large, because small groups can just figure things out. 30 people can figure something out themselves. But large groups, family members, maybe like for family reunions and things like that. If you had a large family of like 800 people, well, like, let's say it's just a few hundred, but you stay connected, it would grow because it would be so powerful. People would want to be a part of that family because you're together. You're doing things like packaging, um, prenatal care together, like lessons and how to do things. And you're starting to put together all kinds of infrastructure for your family that we don't think about today. Things that we do for our kids, maybe, but we can do that on a scale across everybody. Just the amount of cooperation would be unreal. And it incentivizes people to be civil because you're presenting yourself to the rest of the group. We're all saying we're listening to you. We're recognizing you, right? Regardless of whether we're listening. I mean, plenty of people would say, I'm not listening to them. There'd be hateful people against each other. That's the beauty, right? They don't ever talk to each other. They can still vote in the same body of elected representatives. See, this group over here never talks to them, but we're dividing this RQ divided by the common denominator. This RQ divided by the common denominator, the same one. We can add those fractions now. You can't take a group in the institution that's in the United States. You can't say, oh, this group, this institution, 87% agree with this. And this institution, 87%, they might be duplicates. Okay, they might be the same people. We don't know. Who are these people? What? And then no one's even keeping track of who decides what. So these are all these are all elite ran. It's the established people. They're in control and they have processes like the elected representation process that governments use, what they call elected representation. It's just you squeeze everybody through one spot. It's a single winner only. You're guaranteed to have the least competent people make the decision. And when you control the mass propaganda, it's very easy to get everybody on the same page in general. So when you get most incompetent people to make a decision, you're always going to do well if you're trying to control people. But that's that. So I'm like, don't worry about that. We can fix that, but we've got to fix ourselves first. We're not even talking to each other. Let's come together, have a conversation. I elected Thomas Massey. Who have you elected?